great lecture that Candace is going to give us. Candace Wheeler, of course, and if you don't know, she's Executive Director for the Comstock Cemetery Foundation, and she's going to give a great presentation for us today about some of the stories of people who kind of came and went, and then also talk a little bit about the foundation. And if you haven't seen it, they have a booth, a table in the hall, so please, if you like what she talks about, make a donation as well. And thank you again so much for coming. And after this, then we'll do a video, our Really Bad Nevada movie. So if you want to stay, please do. And Candace, thank you.
An introduction like that, right? Are you all staying for the really bad movie? Before I kind of launch into this, just for people that are interested in pursuing ghosts, we have one night a year that the cemetery is officially open. And you may bring your flash cameras and your detectors and your whatever, and you are welcome to actually go in the graveyard. You should bring a flashlight. People literally trip out there in the daytime, and I literally trip out there. In fact, the person manning our booth actually broke her ankle out there. So definitely go for that. I wear many hats, and one of the hats I wear is that I work for the Comstock Historic District Commission. And for those of you that don't know what that is, we are a state-regulated board that is in charge of telling property owners what they can and cannot do with the outside of their homes. It's not a very popular thing, and anyone who has that job usually doesn't live there because it gets a little tricky. So if you want to paint your door red, the answer would be no, and we're in charge of telling you that. I am the founder of and the executive director and board member for the Comstock Cemetery Foundation. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been around since 1999. I am also a historical cultural geographer, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but my emphasis was the study of historic landscapes. Everybody has a journey and how they get where they are, and some people's are kind of convoluted. That would be me. For some reason, I've been fascinated with cemeteries my whole life, and my family has gotten together, and they think I've been to approximately 3,000 cemeteries. And since I've been in 6th grade, and I have been lucky enough to literally see them from Alaska to Australia, from Vienna to California to Egypt, and I have no reasonable explanation as to why. I'm just fascinated with them, and I went on to get my degree in theater arts. Like, who does that, right? And then I went in sales and marketing, and then my husband relocated me from Chicago, nonetheless, to Reno. And like everyone else, eventually you take that windy little road up to the Comstock, and my husband and son, who knew me quite well, saw the cemetery and they just said, "Bye, Mom." So 3 hours later, they just picked me up, and it was literally the only cemetery in all that time that I just couldn't quite leave alone. And so we formed a nonprofit and started to actually do something about it. About 5 years into that, I sent myself back to school because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't craft a story. I didn't understand what was going on. I saw all these things and I couldn't link them together and I couldn't explain them. I just knew weird stuff was happening. I wasn't anal enough to be an archaeologist, so I picked cultural geography, and I specialized in landscapes. The work that we do is, of course, done with a team of people, and what we did was we organized our board to reflect the historic organization that had existed. People that live in Nevada know there's not one, I come from Minnesota, right? You can own land only one way. Well, in Nevada, there's 5,000 different ways to own land. And it was clear that the Masons, the Oddfellows, the Catholic, they all intended to own their own section in the graveyard. Now, they didn't execute it correctly, unfortunately, So even though the deeds were on the books, they weren't legal. But because that was their intention, that's how we organized the board. So we have representatives from all of those different organizations on there, and they literally call the shots for their own cemetery. Now, when you start trying to understand anything, did I lose my D? Yep. When I start trying to understand anything, as everyone knows, you've got to put it in some kind of context. We're talking 1859 is basically when the Comstock started to get built up as a community. Victorians loved death. Absolutely loved it. They had a way to view it. They didn't bother to sub it out to a third party. The women washed the bodies, prepped the bodies. They sat in the parlor for 3 or 4 days. Their cemeteries were up front and center in their residential areas, no problem. They had, and mostly the Anglos, this would be true, they had a system of beliefs in place that is clearly reflected by not only the landscape, but their material culture. If you think about us in modern times, Americans don't like decay, we don't like wrinkles, we don't like death. All of those things are not on our happy list, and so all of our death activities are as far away as we possibly can get it. Third people do this, they mark it up 350%, they get you when you're, and I can say that my first husband was a mortician. I don't even know how that happened either, but anyway, it's just sort of an undercurrent of weird stuff going on. Anyway, so they did. I mean, it's horrible, right? And so you send your aunt or your uncle to some complete stranger. They take care of it. Now think of where our cemeteries are. Can you see them? Do you drive through them? Could you literally drive around Reno for 10 years and never see one? Yeah. The Victorians would find all of that really strange. So, now we run into my thesis. And how am I going to do this? How am I going to explain this? Because this is not a house. This is not a privy. You can't pick one historic date and say, okay, this is it. We're going to go back to 1872 and we're going to make the cemetery look like that. You can't do that because this is a landscape. This has an evolution of use. This has a relationship between people. And unfortunately, we don't tell the story very well up there. When people walk the Silver Terrace cemeteries in Virginia City, which is what they're called, you won't get it just like I didn't get it. And we're trying to do a better job. But for the purpose of my thesis, I looked at primary relationships and I then subdivided them. One relationship is the mourner, right? The person who is there to bury a loved one. Now, keep in mind, it's not chronological. So we bury people there today, as well as we did in 1867. So these can coexist at the same time. Maybe one would have a little bit more weight than the other. The next relationship comes from the visitor. And the visitor is someone who lives in the vicinity of the cemetery, but uses it for a non-burial related purpose. We'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but there's over 150 recorded activities that have nothing to do with the graveyard. Then we have probably my least favorite, and that would be the vandal, the thief and the vandal. Again, these coexisted. You know, we have articles from 1867 where someone was ripping the wood out of the graveyard and building a fire so they could keep warm. So we don't just put a date on it. The last one is the tourists, and these are people that come from pretty far out, and actually this is part of their destination. They use the cemetery for entirely different reasons. So we're basically looking at 170-year history. And while I use this to represent the mourner, it's also a fascinating picture. This was donated to us when I first started working here. It's the only picture we have of an actual mourner in the Silver Terrace cemeteries. And as you can imagine, it's been studied a lot. It's on Memorial Day, and in front of her she has lilacs, and if you look in the back, you can see the decorations on the grave. 70% of what you see in this picture is no longer there. So it's a good picture for us, given that kind of information. Like, it's hard to tell, but these are wooden. This is wooden. These are wooden in the background. So it's a good picture, and this really represents the mourner. And then we have the cemetery now. Throughout its history, it could have been considered derelict at many different times. It's been subject to just huge changes in population. You know, most of you know about the Comstock. I mean, 25,000 people, turn of the century, we're down to 300. And so the landscape interacts with that. Same kind of thing on an ongoing basis. If none of you have ever read this book by Rodman Wilson Paul, you would really enjoy it. Because what it does, and in relation to a cemetery, it's very cool, is he explains how the social structure in a mining town gets started. And you know, usually you think, oh, they just did that and they did the water. Well, he points out that it's the religious and the fraternal organizations that basically started to bring in that social structure. And when he talks about cemeteries, he says, this is kind of a weird thing because most of these towns are very transient. They move around a lot. So having a cemetery is kind of permanent. And he feels it contradicts with the mining landscape in and of itself. Virginia City was slightly different in a couple of ways. And the first way was they had a boom and bust and boom and bust. They also had the ability to reinvent themselves on a continual basis. And so they didn't go the way of Bodie or the ghost towns. That too is a fascinating picture. This is of the Catholic, about 1872. The other interesting thing, and I guess this was at the crux of what was confusing me when I went there, if you guys think of any cemetery in any other mining town you've ever seen, it's like regimented soldiers. It's like little grid lines, thank you, Jefferson. That's all it is. They're all in little lines, they're all 8 feet apart, they all have 3-foot paths. Not here. So why did that happen? Why was that different than nearly every other mining cemetery I had ever seen? And that's really the secret. If people go and they think, oh, it's the life, it's this, really what the secret is that the relationship with that landscape was so incredible that it built it a different way than anywhere else in the American West. I would venture to say there are 3 primary reasons why this landscape got built in a different way. The first is the tragic loss of a loved one. And my only hint is it's not a person. The second thing is frequent death. If you were in 5th grade and I was all talking to you, you would have been to 17 funerals by the time you were in 5th grade if you lived in the Comstock. There was an average of 1 death a day, and remember, the Victorians loved this stuff, right? So they shut down, no noise, they went for blocks. Everybody attended their funerals. So it was very upfront and center. So all of the rituals that applied to death were really important. Secondly, these guys had money, and they had a lot of it. And unlike today, they were willing to work their butts off. So let's take a look at the tragic loss of a loved one. And in order to spin that down for you, what we're actually looking at is sense of place. It is the starting point that geographers analyze in our relationship with the landscape. So if you were not born here, if you were born in Minnesota or you were born somewhere else, and you close your eyes, you can imagine what that landscape looks like. It is almost an interpersonal relationship. I got a big kick out of my son, who comes from Nevada and had never experienced a rainstorm until I took him to Minnesota. That's me hiding behind the curtains. Now he has offered to pay me not to use this. But here is the starting point of a relationship with the Minnesota landscape. Never seen it in his life. And his grandmother and I just sat and watched him. Watched him interact with the weather and have a good time. So he had a very personal experience and a very emotional experience. And most of us who are connected to a landscape know exactly what I'm talking about. So when these people all came to the Comstock, they brought that tendency with them. First two primary places this population came from was Ireland and England. And one amazing thing happens there that doesn't happen here. 46 inches of annual rainfall. We get 9. And we have many documented primary sources that let us know that these people were disgusted. I mean, to call a place dreary, desolate, and uncomfortable and wicked is a good deal. But to call it God-forsaken is a good deal more. And an intolerably large experience of this world's wonders, we never found a place better deserving of that title than Virginia City. They literally thought that that landscape had been passed over by God. Remember, the Victorians liked the nature. Nature equated to God. They looked at our landscaping and it was gross. It was disgusting. So for our purposes, really, I think sense of place and Ireland is what the starting point was to crafting these cemeteries. Sense of place is to know a place fully as if one person knows another. So it's almost like a relationship with a best friend. It's very moving, it's very inspiring, and all these people brought that with them when they came to the Comstock. What else did they bring with them? A couple of other factors. Okay, so Day of the Dead, you all have heard of it, right? 1984, nobody would have heard of it. In fact, even in Mexico, nobody heard of it. It was going downhill, nobody was excited by it, they didn't like it. And then one alarming thing happened in 1985. The Mexican earthquake. And thousands of people died. And what happened? Day of the Dead came back. We know that with a quantity, a huge amount of death, frequency of death, that every ritual that we use becomes really important. So here you have the Comstock who have visions of Ireland dancing in their heads, and now they've got one death a day. And they're dealing with a landscape that they find more than disgusting. So, what do? Remember, they're rich. Now, I usually tell the 5th graders to pretend like they're Mr. Disney and ask what they would do, but usually they say things like, I'd make a lot of money. And I'm like, okay, that's probably right, but we're not gonna go there. What did they do? And unfortunately, there's not a lot of evidence of this left on the ground. They went in, and we're talking 35 acres, they yanked out all the sagebrush. All gone. They yanked out the pinyon trees. They yanked out anything that even remotely looked like a desert landscape. They went to higher points in the cemetery, they sunk water cans, they filled them with water, and then they used piping to drag that down throughout the rest of the cemetery. So they fully irrigated 35 acres of land for $3,700. Today it would cost us 2.9 million to re-irrigate that landscape. Those pipings and those spouts you can still see. So again, another area for confusion as far as I'm concerned. Then they populated it with roses, literally roses from Ireland. Every 20 feet there was a tree planted in the landscape. Every single pathway had, for Gold Hill it was elm trees, for Virginia City it was black locust trees. They were big, they were beautiful. This was described as the prettiest cemetery west of the Mississippi, and if you were there on Memorial Day in 1876, you would have been asked to take your shoes off, because they did not want you crushing one blade of clover, because it was so hard for them to grow it. School kids would come out during the day and cover some of the plantings to protect it from the Nevada sun. They built Ireland on the Comstock, and they were driven to do that because that was a landscape that was meaningful to them. They were experiencing a lot of death, and so those rituals were important to them, and frankly, they had the money to buy it. You know, it's great to have a vision, but if you can't bankroll it, it's not that great to have a vision. It doesn't matter in the end. That type of landscape satisfied the mourners. Each cemetery was lined with little white picket fences, all of which were burned in the 1930s for firewood. Now we're slowly replacing some of those, but that's kind of where they went. What they created was what we would call a garden cemetery, which supposedly was supposed to be out of style in America by 1857. Yet the motivation for the people that settled in Virginia City was so strong they could care less what was in or out of vogue. They wanted a landscape that made sense to them, and they built a garden landscape. The very first garden cemetery that we had in the United States was in Boston in the 1830s. The unique thing about this is, once again, we have visitors going to the graveyard in Victoria times to commune with nature. This is where our national park system actually starts. This dual usage begins here. We studied the many uses. Yeah, photography, this. I mean, when I first got there, we tried to cut vandalism down, and we went to this big commission meeting. You know, I was the fast talking chick from out of town, so anytime I went anywhere, the little old ladies would all come and see what evil thing I was gonna do next. And so I went to the commission meeting and I thought, well, I'm just gonna recommend that we walk the graveyard at night, right? So this little lady gets up in the back, she's probably 89 years old, and she said, you know, I lost my virginity in that cemetery, and you're not locking the gates. You know, based on her age, that was actually a cultural activity, and so to this day, we have not locked the gates in the cemetery. Anyway, she was one of the recorded uses, I guess. Anyway, you see people, and there's tons of things that were done back then. You know, they're walking in the park. Emily Dickinson wrote about what a wonderful experience it was for her to walk in Mount Auburn and commune with the nature. So this is a very natural thing for us to do, and certainly Silver Terrace Cemeteries was used for that exact same purpose. The vandal is not my fave thing. Now I'm going to ask you to just focus on this for a little while, because I'm going to overlay it with another picture. And what will help you is just keep in mind these two tall little markers. This is actually a Habs photograph, so this is later in the century. So we're talking like 1940s. This is 2005.
Wow.
Now, yeah, we got a couple things. First of all, about 5 years ago, vandalism in a cemetery was made a felony. So that's one thing good. The second really bizarre thing is people got freaked out when they stole stuff. And they all of a sudden thought, well, gosh, this caused my divorce, or this is why I got really sick. And so they start mailing stuff back to us. I mean, I walked in the graveyard, there's a UPS package right in the middle of the graveyard that says caretaker. And I open it up, and there's a chunk of stuff in here from some woman in Oregon, and she wants me to promise to put it back. I mean, people sent chicken bones, literally, because they didn't know what they were, to the tourism authority, and made them promise to go bury him in the graveyard. So, for my thesis, I started phoning these people. I called 61 people that stole from the graveyard. They all had exactly the same reason for stealing from the graveyard. And that reason was because it looked like crap. You didn't care. No different than throwing a rock through a derelict building. So why can't I liberate something? Obviously, you guys don't care at all. So we put up a $250,000 fence, and sure enough, theft and vandalism dropped 91% in the first year. Not because they couldn't get over it, just because everyone knows that that's expensive. Obviously, we care about it. And just that action alone was enough to dissuade people. But they felt it was fair game. In 1972, there was an article that ran in the San Francisco Bee encouraging people from California to come to Virginia City if they wanted to liberate some wrought iron for their homes. One of the fastest things that was stolen was vet markers that were taken, flipped over, and used as patio pavers. Yeah, it's pretty gross, isn't it?
Candace, can you go back in that picture and then do it again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, am I that good?
Let's keep it.
Oh!
Stop. I want to see this.
Oh, and you know why this one's cool too? See this? We actually have only one of those got returned. This guy was a violinist. And this was hand cut, I don't know what you call it, but it's like layered wood, like veneer, I guess, almost. They had one thing underneath, and then the cutout part was laid on top, and it was all painted white.
I still have a hard time with it. They thought that was okay to do.
I agree.
Don't you?
Okay, you want me to flip?
It's for top right.
So anyways, and that's true of most of the cemeteries there as well. It's not like it's just Virginia City. So, we have more weddings, more people got married in that cemetery last year than got buried there. We literally had a couple dressed like zombies. And you know, for $500, I don't care. You know, it's just, I'm like, cross my palm, baby, you can dress whatever way you want.
So the government recognizes them and pay for a study, then why not?
Yes, why not? Exactly my point. So visitors got married. Visitors do weird things with photography.
Interesting. Oh, wait a minute.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, that's kind of cool. This guy
That
takes
is cool.
Victorian nudes and transposes them in various places in the cemetery. Oh, now I did that wrong, sorry. You have to see the naked body again. There we go. Plein air. We have constantly have painters that come in there. Yoga. So, it's about 148 different uses. And unfortunately, we have the drugs, we find the needles, we find the drinking, we find the people that want to start a fire on the back of a headstone. So we have all those gross things too. But there are very positive things that the visitor will use the cemetery for. Now we move to the tourist. Why are all these people coming to the cemetery? Okay, the cemetery is the most visited venue on the Comstock. with no advertising, no prompting. We don't offer tours unless someone really begs me. Yet, we get about 100 people a day during the high season. So why is that? Well, as part of my thesis, I went out there and tried to, ask a few people, and they blew me off. So I went to a high school, and I hired 6 really cute girls in little short skirts. They interviewed 1,300 people, and they got 100% response rate. So I can now tell you why those people were there.
Probably know the girl she hired.
They basically all had the same kind of an answer, and that was, it was a sense of pastness. They were there because nobody was directing how they interpreted this experience, and they almost could tell. They could see the age, they could feel the history, and they got to be outside. I mean, there were a few other things, but generally, oops, am I going backwards again? Generally, that's what they did. I mean, we do have funky things like this every now and then. That tree fell down, thank God, so we can't do it again. How am I doing it for time? Oopsie, better go quick. Okay, this is great. Sorry. Okay. Oh, now I'm going the wrong way. Jeez Louise. So, one of the things we did is we went ahead and got a master plan. Took us a lot of money because, I mean, it's like a $200,000 thing. It's a big deal. We're talking about 65 acres of land. And so we had professional people come in, look at the landscape problems, look at the irrigation problems, look at kind of what we were going to do. And you know what? They came up with some seriously good ideas. One of which is, we know exactly what was planted in every individual cemetery. So at the entrance of these cemeteries, there will be little planters put in, because we can't irrigate the whole 30 acres again. But they'll at least have some flowers in there, so they kind of know what's going on.
That's a great idea.
Now, if you stop out at the table, do leave donations. We also have obit books. If you guys have ever read obituaries, they're so cool. They're not like ours today. This is like he dropped dead and he's going to be buried there. See you later. Bye. These are wonderful stories. I mean, keep in mind, they love the details and what was oozing where. I mean, if anybody's ever, read Alf Doden, this was the grossest death he'd ever seen, the biggest parade he's ever seen. Anyway, he's very good. And the other thing is just a little story. It's called Ellen's Rose. Alf Doden had an affair with who he referred to as Mrs. M. Does everyone know Alf Doden? He was a journalist up here that wrote almost every day of his life. Really good source of material. Anyway, this woman, Ellen, who is buried there, is a sister of Mrs. M. She got married to Thomas Diamond when she was 22 years old, and unfortunately within 3 months she died of typhoid fever. And we have the funeral described, it was really long and typical Victorian funeral, right? Well, fast forward about 150 years, and my stonemason and I are in this site because her marker is about ready to crash over. So we're digging and trying to get the base up, and all of a sudden, Cal goes, holy moly. And he has, that's not exactly what he said, Anyway, it takes a lot to get to us, after this amount of time, right? And we both just sat there because underneath the surface was a little handcrafted rose that someone had reused a tin can and made the rose with the little stem. That's the actual rose head there. And so a local jeweler actually redid it for us, which is kind of a cool thing. The other thing we interviewed people for was, what did they want to see in the master plan? Well, remember, the number one reason they were there to begin with is because of the sense of pastness. They felt the history. So we already knew we're not cleaning this place up. If it's not gonna fall on anybody, it's not gonna hurt anybody, and it's not gonna hurt itself, it gets to stay. Because they want the patina. The tree growing out of the wrought iron, the dusty road that really was gravelled at some point. We'll put little hints here and there, because we gotta do a better job crafting the story, but that's literally what people are after. They studied all the tourist movements, all the erosion, they studied how it was, and you see the masons, once again, this is not a grid. They literally configured this so it looks like, from a distance, it would have looked like a trowel and a shovel, and they built it up on a hill because the masons wanted to be on top, so to speak. And so they just did amazing things. No grid work for them. And this shows where their general bearing plan here is and how things are going to be integrated. And then every now and then there's a little garden so that when people walk in, they at least will get an idea of what that cemetery looked like and what it was really meant to be like for those people back then. Biggest important thing for me is the landscapes are changing. This landscape changes in use and function all the time. From dinners to doing a variety of other things, this landscape is never static, and their human relationships are always different, and it literally crafts the landscape in which they are. So, and that's it.
Smith for Shop Talk, and one of my favorite artists in town has a new store. It's also called Pick a Little Pete from the past, but she's relocated to 868 Emerald Bay Road in South Lake Tahoe. And I tell you, I missed your store. I'm glad to see you're open and in a nice, actually by my house, so I'm real happy to be here. And tell you, it's good to see you. You're my favorite artist, and I'm glad you have a nice store.
Thanks. I'm glad to be back in your show, and the business here is a little bit different. Instead of being just a boutique, like I was when I was renting at the Horizon Casino Resort. Here we have a kind of an art gallery where you can shop my own creations, gemstones, silver, gold, antiques, jewelry antique from the Middle East, from the Far East, some from Italy, some from Europe, and you can find some antique rugs from...
When you say fine creations by Paul Albersini, you're not kidding, because everything you do and make is awesome.
Thank you. Everything is one of the kind. I'd never repeat a model. It's against my luck. Also, I'm very Italian and very believing in luck. I never repeat a model, everything is different. Unless you buy a model and you want me to make 2 or 3 for you, in that case I do it. Otherwise, you buy a model, it's yours, it remains my trademark, but it's your necklace, and I don't sell it to anybody else.
Well, one of a kind is just makes what you have just awesome. And my wife has a lot of things that match earrings and necklace and the whole kit and caboodle, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And
yes, and they can be adjusted to your perfect size. I start from a design, and depends from the personality of a person that is going to wear it. I can make it a little bit longer or shorter, or add or a color or something, but usually you get attracted by that design and it fits perfectly on you. And they're all natural gemstone, AAA, and I mean the best quality of gemstones. They don't lose the color. That means that they are natural in the sun. When they can become white, that means that they sold you something that is not what they tell you it is. And so there are a lot of conveniences. Plus, if something happens, I can always repair it or change it after a while if you get tired to wear it. And
I do believe you fixed some of our things before too.
yeah,
So
I fix things too. Not all, mostly my work I fix it. Work of other people usually I don't do that. And we starting this year to promote my store and to give back to the community. We start one evening every month. There will be ad on the Mountain View. We will benefit a non-profit organization here in Talkin. We start November 12th with Turning Point. Turning Point will be hosting I will be hosting the evening for Turning Point. There will be this necklace that is jade, druzy, and green amethyst and pearls. They will cost $2 a ticket for the lottery. You can buy as many tickets as you want, $2 each. Who win the ticket, win the necklace, and the profit of a ticket sale is going to go to Turning Point.
well, it's a fine organization. You can do this every month.
I do every month for 1 year. I'm going to have Humane Society, or Lake Tahoe, the Dorado Shelter, Boys and Girls Club, and we go from there. And I have a list of people that I contact. They interested to come here. There will be a little refreshment, a little wine for people that drinks, a little water or mineral water or lemonade, homemade lemonade by a friend of mine that is a crafter also, and some little snacks to eat. And so you can see what's hanging in this gallery. We have some beautiful Ottomans rugs handmade in Turkey.
They're absolutely beautiful.
Those are also one of a kind, one knot at a time, made with real wool, as I pronounce it wrong because I'm Italian, but you know what I mean, wool. And natural vegetable colors. They last forever. You can pass the vacuum cleaner on top of them 30, 50, 100 of times. They don't lose nothing, they don't fall apart. And it's a friend of mine from Turkey that he gave it to me, and we probably will make a Turkish night also here with more rugs. We have rugs that can be big like this room. Of course, I don't have them at the store, but the guy will bring them. I have some pillows from Turkey, some Ottoman jewelry, replica, lead and nickel free, very reasonable prices. I have all kinds of new things that I didn't have when I was at the Horizon, like these small earrings made with crochet beads and nuts from the Philippines, sterling silver. And those are for the animal lovers. Some they have dogs with belief, justice, honesty, and everything is made with natural metal like gold, gold-filled, silver. Then I have Venetian beads, authentic from Venezia, Italy. Those are unique, one of the kind. They're in the corner, and those are pretty frail, but you want to make sure that a perfect lady always wears something. And then, so this is the necklace we auctioned. Then I have some small statuettes. I believe in the peace and the kindness of spirit of the East. So there is Buddha, Ganesh in...
There's a ring on the top shelf that I kind of liked. Is that a tiger eye, or I didn't really know what it was. It looks like an eye.
This one?
Yes.
That's an agate.
Yeah, it's absolutely,
an agate.
it's absolutely beautiful. I just,
That's an agate from Turkey.
yeah, it really jumped out to me that it looked nice.
And this is the mala beads for prayer. Those are statuette in Labradorite. And this is fluorite. This is a lapis. And this is tiger's eye, the one at the bottom.
Awesome.
This is an antique piece that they use in Rajasthan in the old days on the head of a horse for decoration. I made a necklace with some peridot out of it. That's a very rare piece. the rings from Turkey against the evil eye. Yeah, all kind of things.
And then in your front cases here, now
Here
those
is
are, these are all your
turquoise.
your handmade creations that you made them all yourself, right?
Those are so these pieces, these 3-4 pieces are antiques from India.
Oh, okay.
Those are all my creations, and this is natural turquoise with different gemstones. I mix and match colors and cultures. That's what I do. I travel a lot in my younger age now. I'm terrorized to take an airplane, so I don't travel, but just to go to see my family in Italy. But I don't know, here we have agate, blue lace agate with some chalcedony and some turquoise from India, some druzy, the clasp, the vintage from Europe. I have my little corners where I go shop that nobody knows because I come from there. I've been doing this work forever for Mario Valentino, Crizia, Gianfranco Ferré in the 80s. So I know the little corners of the world in this part of the world and other part of the world where they love me and they will always have their own hands and the arm open to see me. And but I can find, different things. Like I can show you these beads, for example. If you want to walk with your glass case, with your camera later in that glass case there are some antique beads from Africa.
Okay, let's stop here and move the camera.
Yes, those are very rare and very difficult to find in the Casbah of Paris.
Positions, and we're here to look
Here
at
we are.
your what was the product we're looking at?
This necklace here, so maybe I should take it out from the glass case and you can see better. This one, the red and turquoise. Those red beads, they are trade beads from the west coast of Africa.
They're beautiful.
Unfortunately, nobody wants to go there now, and I don't recommend it either. But 30, 40 years ago, when I went there, there was the boom in Europe of trade beads, and I got so many of it, and I saved a lot of them. Some they remain with a stylist, and goodbye, bonjour. But those are very difficult to find, and those are really unique. And I mix them with some chalcedony and some turquoise enamel over silver. And so I have some other that I got in a museum of beads in Northern California from a Frenchman that is the biggest importer in Europe of excuse me, of Czechoslovakian glass. This is an antique piece too. And I don't know, all my things that have a different look. I mix, those are antique cameos, the pink ones.
That's what my wife loves, so I'll probably be coming back here soon.
This is all tourmaline, and very rare to find now. It comes in different colors and shapes, and ammonite. And you see what I see I like. Not all I see I like, unfortunately, but most of the things that I like I can afford to buy, and then I design with them, and I mix and match them until the point I make a necklace. I don't always do that. Sometimes I don't do nothing for months. I just hang in my store, and then suddenly I start to design. And I have a small bags also for kids and for people that want to learn of authentic Czechoslovakian beads, not the Chinese one, the Czechoslovakian, the Czech Republic, that have a value, and I sell them for $5 a bag. There are inside like 10 to 20 beads. Enough to make a necklace, to learn how to bead, to design. You can buy some wrapping wire. You can come here, I can teach for you. And I have some little bit of Venetian jewelry from, after this is from Verona, Italy. We have a little bit of everything. Clothing from a designer from Hong Kong, silk, jeans from Montreal, and jeans from Montreal are hidden like always in the back. Maybe one day we go there.
It's
And
okay.
then
We have a lot of product here. I tell you,
there
it's
is
a beautiful store.
Yeah, I have a small hats for the cold, big hats like the one on top with the flower and the feathers. You can go to Longchamp for the horse race. And we try to keep a little bit unique. I not accustomed to go in another store and look what they have and then run to my store and buy the same thing. That's not my way to do business. If I go in another store, I make sure I don't have what they have. And maybe I'm egotistical, but that's how I like. And I have vintage jeans with embroidery designed in Los Angeles for the baby boomer with high waist. I have low waist jeans from Montreal, as I told you, very tight and sexy for younger girls. And sweaters, leather jackets.
You have a lot more variety, but everything
Yes.
you've bought is
Everything is one of the kind. All these
Yeah.
earrings are all unique. They're all one. You cannot find a pair that is the same than the other one.
I always love your drusies though, and your necklace.
Druzy, I have some spectacular pieces here. Come here, Michael. I'll show you a beautiful piece in this glass case. This one. This is druzy with some Ethiopian opal.
Oh wow!
This is druzy with some citrine, rough citrine has to be polished. The more you polish the stone, the more you clean it, the smaller it becomes and the shinier it becomes. But those, they're all shining anyway because they are natural, but that's how you, in Amsterdam, in the old days, they used to polish the stone to make those beautiful multi-stone rings with all these gemstones. Now we use bigger gems, rough gems. The style is different. I mean, of course, if you go to the Oscar, you find some actors with huge, but those are different pockets also. We don't have this kind of prices here. This is beautiful citrine with diamond pave. I have a lot of things with diamond pave that I can design. With crystal, with black snakes in diamond pave, earrings, they're not ready yet, they will come out for the Christmas holiday. And vintage pendants from India in the box there. Used to be a box for the silverware in silver, and we put the pendants in a lot of sapphire. I have a lot of sapphire also. I like sapphire. It comes in so many different colors, and it's all hand cut and faceted hand cut. Larimar fossil.
Well, I tell you, it's a beautiful place. Well, everybody's gonna have to come down here and see it for yourself. I don't
Yeah.
think the camera's gonna do it justice, but when you saw what my wife was wearing on her birthday, the three pieces that matched, it was just absolutely beautiful. And each one's like one of a kind, handmade.
Yeah, like these, those are antique beads, you see? Those are antique beads from Africa. And the clasp is a clasp from, no, I almost break my neck. That has been already broken by a doctor. This is a clasp from Europe, from the 1940s. So I mix match things, and I doubt you can find the same product in another store, maybe in New York, but not here in Tahoe for sure. And so we try to keep the unicity of our work for our store here, for our customers. So you can be sure this is a small community, lovely, a wonderful community where I'm very happy to be part of, that you don't find the same lady at the same party with the same necklace you wear.
Come down and check out the store. You'll absolutely love it, and then get involved with their charity auctions. I think that's going to be an awesome thing for the community. You said Turning Point is this month, and then next
November
month.
12 from 6 to 7:30. The store is open to the public. There are refreshment, white cold wine because Italian just cold, and no ice, and mineral water, San Pellegrino, and lemonade made by Happy Brian. And then we will have some little hors d'oeuvre, and we'll put a beautiful necklace in a raffle for $2 a ticket. It's up to you to buy as many tickets as you want, and all the profit of the tickets they're going to go to Turning Point, that is helping young women and men that they didn't have the culture to understand that alcohol only brings you to a wrong path at a certain point in your life, and they decide to turn. That's why it's called Turning Point, and these people help them, and I want to help them too. And then there will be Boys and Girls, December 12, and then we will have the Humane Society, I Love Animals, and then other non-profit organization here in the Lake Tahoe Basin. We will benefit for 1 year, every 12, 13 of a month, a different non-profit organization, and all the profit of a raffle, they go to the organization.
Well, that's one reason why I come here. If your business helps people, then Shop Talk will show up and help out too. And Polly just happens to be one of the people that hand makes things. I think she's an artist, one of the best artists in Tahoe, and you should come out and to see her work. You won't even believe it. And come out and even order something that she can hand make for your family. It'll be completely unique. And she says in her business, Pick a Little Pete, Fine Creations, Fine Creations, and it's beyond fine. It's absolutely stunning. So again, Paul is at 868 Emerald Bay Road,
Sweet
Sea in South Lake Tahoe. You just take it right at the Y, and it's on the left-hand side.
The Highway 89 going to Emerald Bay.
Just past what Hunan Gardens, is it?
Just past Hunan Garden, we are in a small shopping center. We all artists in this shopping center. And we are out of a craziness of a casino, so if you want to shop, we come and find an easy parking place, there are all the commodity, and to be, in Tahoe, in a different location of Tahoe, and if you like a stone, I can design something for you, and you can always come and just pay a visit and say hello.
Well, thank you for Paula for being on Shop Talk, and I think you're a true genius, and I hope people come and really appreciate your work. It's been Michael Smith reporting from South Lake Tahoe. Thank you very much.
Arrivederci.